Back on record. Welcome back. For the second half of the meeting, I'm going to go through the other 5 pillars of the Police and Crime Plan. I'm going to be quite light touch in the interest of time, having done the deep dive on Pillar 2. So item 7, which is Pillar 1, Sustaining Norfolk Constabulary. I've got my page numbering right this time. We're on page 38 of the papers. Actually, the content that I wanted to look at, we've already covered under the financial statement. So I don't propose to ask any questions under Pillar 2. Pillar 1. Are there any questions that we want to bring up from the floor? That's easy then. We can move very swiftly on then to item 8. And having done Pillar 2, we're now jumping forward to Pillar 3, Tackling Crime. And that report begins on page 50. First question I've got is relates to table 10, and it's solved rates and charge rates for rape and serious sexual offences, which have seen increases both against the previous 12 months and the long-term averages. Are you able to comment on causes of these increases?
I'll ask Nick to explain if that's okay, Commissioner.
No, Commissioner, thank you. So, yes, so I think what I would say in the first instance is it's pleasing to see a slow and steady rise in respect to the solve rate, but obviously clearly 9% is not a figure to really shout out about in terms of those unsolved crimes.
It's higher than the national average.
Yes, that is where I was going to go to it. So I think there's a recognition that, you know, we must strive to do better than where we currently are. But in the context of the journey, there's that steady increase that we've seen. And actually, as we compare with England and Wales forces, we are actually in a significantly stronger position than virtually most other forces in the United Kingdom at this time. And that's pleasing. But there's clearly a lot of work to be done. So what do I think is going on here? So I think from a positive perspective, I would signpost Commissioner you to the work of OpEngage, which is a body of officers and staff that we've specifically employed, following some detailed sort of analysis about where we were seeing victims finding it really difficult to continue to engage with the criminal justice process. And we've then set up OpEngage, which is a dedicated support team to those victims of rape and serious sexual offences to try and help them continue to navigate and engage the criminal justice process as we seek to investigate, go through the courts, those processes. So I think we are starting to see some really positive results in respect to that investment that we've made, and it's about continuing to sustain that investment and support the victims of those crimes in that way. And then actually taking the practice of that small dedicated team, and spreading the good practice across the wider detectives and investigators that deal with other types of victim kind of focused crimes in respect to that. So that's one area that I think we're starting to see some really strong evidence and will play a part in the success of those increasing outcomes.
Presumably, forgive me interrupting you, presumably if we could reduce court delays, we would be able to increase that greater because of the ability to keep victims on board.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a criminal justice process involving a number of agencies, and you know, and as you know, Commissioner, the police receive the complaint, we collect the evidence, we get it to the Crown Prosecution Service, we then make a decision, and then of course it's in courts. And all of the agencies within that process have clearly got challenges, but you're absolutely right. If we could get quicker decisions from the Crown Prosecution Service, recognising the challenges that they've got, if we could get courts time more quickly allotted, recognising the challenges they've got, that would be a significant benefit to the victim.
Okay, thank you.
So the other thing I would want to signpost you to is the digital investment that we've made. We've got our police digital investigators, quite a core team now, digital investigators that are specialists that are helping us with our investigations, which means that we can get to the evidential basis that we need to much more quickly. It's also allowing us to deal with the national issue in terms of returning phones to victims of rape and serious sexual offences, and that's significantly improved in terms of where it once was. And we keep working hard in respect to that, making sure that we only seize the phones when we need to, get them downloaded quickly, get them back to the victim as quickly as we possibly can, make sure that we're only focusing on the issues that we need to focus on in respect to the perpetrator, and not trawling through all of the phone of the victim, which is obviously something that's been nationally, so that we're making good respect to that. And then
forgive a further interruption. Digital investigators and the kiosk for downloading phones, I think, was quite heavily funded from Precept, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So
that's Norfolk's Public helping them,
absolutely,
the victims of these crimes, which is really, really.
So we're both with yours and the public support in and around. We are seeing that improvement to supporting Norfolk's victims of rape and serious sexual offence, and through that significant investment.
Great, thank you.
So 2 quick areas then, and I think that's probably where I would stop in respect to the question, is we've worked really hard with colleagues in respect to the management information, so we can absolutely track cases now within an inch of their life. And that helps us understanding the outstanding suspect numbers, the time taken to actually get investigations completed, so that the supervisors can make sure that they're supporting the officers with all of the issues that they have to deal with in the interests of the victim. So that's another strong piece of work that we've been doing, which is adding to that overall positive outcome. And then finally, nationally, there's Operation Soteria Bluestone, which is a best practice national operating model for the investigation of rape and serious sexual offences, led by the National Police Chief Council. We are adopting the Soteria principles. We're keyed in the national effort in respect to that, and getting all of the good national practice and disseminating that throughout Norfolk in terms of our workforce and our practices and processes. So I think a combination of those things is what I'd highlight you to in respect to your question and what we're seeing in respect to the positive direction of travel of the outcomes.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to table 15, which is agricultural crime types, so hair coursing, farm machinery thefts, livestock worrying, and so on. Also reductions in volume compared to the previous 12 months and the long-term average, despite national reports suggesting the cost of agricultural crime, and that's, I emphasise the word cost there, has increased. And the question I've got says, please could you explain?
So I think there's a couple of things I'd like to observe, if I may, Commissioner. Firstly, in respect to that reference to increasing costs, I think that refers to the National Farming Union's Mutual's Rural Crime Report 2022, which indicated rising costs and seems to contradict some of the kind of figures that the constabulary has highlighted too.
They suggested a 52% increase, but that was purely based on financial value, not on numbers of incidents.
And I think that's the key in separating. It's apples and pears rather than apples and apples. I mean, the good news is in that table is the reduction over the long term and the last 12 months. You know, those are really, thankfully, small numbers, relatively speaking, but good reduction and a good direction of travel. On the NFU point, I mean, they do base their costs on insurance claim data. Insurance values can be inflated. They calculate their estimated cost by including theft types, which are not including the police classification farm machinery. Again, back to that apples and pears kind of distinction there. And then finally, inflation has increased both the valuation and insurance costs. So GPS equipment is particularly expensive now, far more than it was even a year ago. So just to deal with that point about the difference between the insurance company and our figures, I think those are some of the contributing factors there. What I would like to really concentrate on in terms of the good news is, you know, hair coursing, we've got a really strong response here. Hair coursing under Galileo. We're keyed in with regional coordination across the 7 forces within the region. That allows us to share good practice, intelligence and information, which helps us on the ground. We have a strong enforcement approach using our community action notices that we've got available to courts and issuing those out to put control over the individuals engaging in their courses. Most interestingly, and I think this is the absolute crux here and differentiator, Norfolk, we seize the dogs. Not many forces do that because of the kennelling costs. So, of course, if you're coming into Norfolk with a view to illegally hair forcing, you will meet an incredibly hostile environment and response from Norfolk and Statbridge in protection of our rural communities. We will issue you with sanctions. We will seize your equipment and your dog. And of course, if that's your game, and we've seized your dog at the beginning of the season, that's you done for the season. So it's a real strong deterrent value as well as prosecution approach, I think adds up to that reduction that we've got. And we're really pleased with that. And we continue with that approach. On the livestock worrying, so look, pleasingly, the numbers are relatively speaking low. If I was to reflect and give an opinion, I think what we saw during the COVID pandemic is we saw a rise of dog ownership, and therefore perhaps some people were not as familiar with the rural kind of environment and rules around sheep worrying and a mixture of dogs and livestock. And we did see a spike as a consequence of dogs worrying sheep. We've worked really hard through our rural crime officers and Op Randall in terms of our newsletter, media offer, and going out to particular hotspots where we saw this in terms of providing an education piece. We do prosecute and investigate where we need to. Only last week, I was speaking to an officer about one such case in terms of worrying livestock. But there was a rise in dog ownership. We had to spend a period of time teaching people that you've got to keep your dog on the lead because the dog will go after the sheep. And that's the kind of the main issue there. And then finally, on the machinery theft, there is a significant East European Russian market. Let's be clear, particularly since what's going on. Russia is isolated by international sanctions. They can't get products, yet they still need to obviously farm themselves. So organised crime groups are actively across the UK as well as Europe stealing GPS tracking units and take them over to that market because it's lucrative. That's what's going on. We saw a spike about 5 years ago in Norfolk. It's less so now in comparison to that 5-year period. But of course, these are really, really expensive units. And if a farm loses 4, 5, 6 a night, that's £30,000 worth of kit just gone. So we do lots of work over night with our proactive teams, Moonshot and the local hot lists in respect to any OCG, organised crime group, intel that we've got around vehicles so that we can try and find it and disrupt them, arrest them. But mainly, this is prevention. We work closely with the farms and kind of try and convince them that they might need to think about their practices daily in terms of don't leave the unit on the top of the tractor. You know, if I was to have a £10,000 carbon fibre pedal bike, I wouldn't leave it on the reef rack of my car outside my home on the street. I'd take it inside and I'd make sure it was secure. That's an incredible investment for me. These units are £6,000. Of course, practicing is if they just leave them on top of the tractors. Now, the argument back, of course, is I can't have my farm worker at the end of the day in the night time climbing up on a slippery tractor. I appreciate and understand that responsibility, but there is something for the farming community to think about here. We're working really closely with Ben Burgess in terms of they've got lots of contracts, so we share lots of information and we work closely with Ben Burgess in respect to that. And ultimately, Ben Burgess is engaging with the industry because I think this is an industry solution here. Much like in the 1990s when there was an epidemic of thefts of car radios and cassettes from cars because they were all detachable. The industry by 2000 completely integrated them into the car design element, and it just killed it. I do strongly believe that GPS tracking units is something about practice and there's something about an industry-led solution. But it's really pleasing to see the reduction in crime and all the hard work that the officers are undertaking to try and achieve it.
My only sort of comeback on that is the difference between perception and reality. And I'm not sure the farmers perceive that the threat is reducing. I think their perception is the threat is rising. And I'm not quite sure how we address that, but that perhaps is one of the next steps.
I mean, I think we'll try. I'll take it away with the conversation thing about the Op Randall newsletter, which is widely circulated. Challenge the team about how can you deal with that perception issue with respect to facts and figures about what's reported and see if that helps.
I mean, I'd just cite the example of a couple of letters I've had from MPs without naming the MPs where the message has come back that in that particular parish, agricultural crime is rampant. So you'd think it was Dodge City on Saturday night. When I've gone to the Randall team through Ralph Jackman's and said, what's the reality? It's 1 or 2 incidents over the last 2 years. But nevertheless, the parish council has briefed a member of parliament that it's Dodge City on a Saturday night. And that seems to be the prevalent perception. And it's going to take a bit of knocking down, I think. Right, let's move on then. Those are my 2 questions under item 8. Is there anything else on item 8? Let's go on then to item 9, preventing offending. Which I think begins on page 62. I haven't really been giving people the opportunity to introduce the reports, and that's an oversight.
Well, I'll
correct that and give you the opportunity to introduce the report.
I'm more than happy to introduce the report. And I,
Apologies, I've been too keen.
well, no, I present the report to. Forgive me. All I was going to say in regard to the report, you will have read the report undoubtedly. We you know, I suspect everyone else has, and you'll have seen the highlights of the report. Given the time and where we are, I think I just present the report and allow questions if there are any to be presented.
I'll just pick up one, if I may, which is, can you say a little bit about the Constabulary's approach to out-of-court disposals and the Joint Justice Service Order diversion team? I think that's particularly topical given recent political announcements.
Yes, indeed. So if I may just introduce what an out-of-court disposal is, it's a way of finishing an investigation. So a crime will come into us and it will be a crime, call it as a crime, and we will investigate it thoroughly. But dealing with it without the formal court proceeding. Now, let me be absolutely clear. And this is not about a way of us not going through the court process if it's necessary. Of course, to the point we raised earlier around where the courts are, I think Nick made mention when he was talking about serious sexual offences, some of the, you know, understandable but frustrating delays in the system, and some of those court dates that seem to be 12, 18 months ahead of us. What an out-of-court disposal effectively allows is swift justice, proportionate swift justice, but bringing victims' views. So this is not without a victim's voice, and it allows us to improve that journey and improve the timeliness and allow the victim to effectively to get closure and for us to move on. What it doesn't mean that it's necessarily an easy outcome for a suspect or an offender. It means that actually we look at the offender and they're usually predominantly out-of-court disposals are issued when it's low level, when it doesn't have that wider community impact, and often when it's first time offending. So it gives the individuals an opportunity to sidestep formality of the criminal justice outcome through the courts, but it still means that a punishment is effectively issued. And these can be a whole range of different things around, you know, letters of apologies, clearly payment for damage, some sort of the kind of processes that we would, in conversation with the victim, get satisfaction to. You know, and in some cases, depending on the crime type, the victim just wants an acknowledgement that the individual has been identified, that they accept their guilt. A letter and say, I'm sorry that, you know, whatever came over. Clearly, what you don't do, you don't get serious out-of-court disposals. You get a chance as a perpetrator, as an offender, to get an out-of-court disposal, and then you do generally lock into the court process. We in Norfolk, so you know, around the room, you'll probably be aware that there was a series of what we would have termed out-of-court disposals, such as penalty notice for disorder, simple cautions, cannabis warnings. Now, that's all being consolidated effectively to the out-of-court disposal, which fall into 2 parts, which are community resolutions, in relation to a letter, some reparations, mending the damage, doing something like that, and the conditional caution. The conditional caution is an enhancement of a simple caution, admissions of guilt, and then some sort of action on the back of that. And that could also be some sort of diversion to a diversion scheme to support and help the individual not do it again effectively, but it is conditional. So if they fail the conditions of the caution, they get back onto the court process. So effectively, as I say, it's a two-tier system now. It's a much simpler system. It's into the courts or it's out of court disposal, which is conditional caution or community resolution.
There's a sort of supplementary. I'll think out loud. You might wish to comment or not, but reflecting what I was listening to on the radio coming in when ministers were talking about not sending people to prison if they got sentences less than a year on. And one of the comments made was that actually there's a greater chance of reoffending for people who had short sentences than those who had committed serious offences. Therefore, if we're going to prevent offending, there's probably more work we need to do with that cohort in conjunction with probation. And I haven't yet, as I say, I'm thinking out loud, we probably need to get around a table and work out what that agenda should be and who the partnership should be to deliver it. Because I think if we wait for probation to do it alone, it will be an unfair challenge for them as a single organisation.
It is, Commissioner, but without sounding too traditional, I think when we've described earlier around what our core mission is, of course, part of what we are is about prevention of crime, and we do need to work in partnerships. But we do, through the Criminal Justice Board and other partnerships, ensure that others have both the capacity and the focus. I don't disagree that we have a part to play in supporting, but equally we are at the front edge. I probably mentioned this before. We lead. We're the gateway to the criminal justice system, and we always lead with our kind of metaphoric chin. If things are going wrong, it's always the police's, or it's perceived as the police's fault. We've just talked a whole range of other things, and we have plenty on our plate as it is at the moment. We've talked about some of the financial challenges and that kind of core mission that the chief has kind of set me and others in this room to deliver against. I am for working in partnerships. I don't read, I'm not, but I'm also for those that are designated and commissioned with the responsibilities, discharge their responsibilities as well as they can. We will always support that. So I'm not disagreeing. I think you're right. I think under the mantle that you have, I think it's absolutely appropriate that we start looking at, and we're already doing some of that in terms of making sure that our out of court disposals, be it community resolutions that we actively hold, and then the out of court and then the additional caution that we work in conjunction with CPS, because clearly if somebody fails their caution conditions, they drop back into a charge effectively, and therefore need to be, or CPS need to be happy that the standard of evidence is charge worthy. So we already work in partnership. But yes, to your point, yes, of course, and I'm sure others in the room will probably agree. It's just about working out who's responsible for what.
So, absolutely. Just in terms of the day-to-day management of what's taking place in the prisons at the moment, we are establishing a gold command structure locally, because we anticipate that there will need to be some coordinated activity across department agencies to make that happen. Once one part of the system is struggling, it ripples elsewhere, whether it be things such as prisoner transport, whether it be about getting people to remand hearings. So we are making sure that we get a coordinated response in place. I do think that if following the announcements that were made yesterday, once we can see the written details of those announcements, it would be incumbent upon all agencies involved in the system just to take a look to see if they need to recalibrate their offering. And I'd include within that inspectorates as well, because it's of note that when the inspectorate come to look at Norfolk Constabulary, the one outcome that they will be most focused on is number of people charged. And they will have less interest in the number of people who receive out of court disposals. And that inspection activity might be out of kilter with actually what new and emerging policy is. And we need to be careful that we don't put downstream pressure onto a criminal justice system that is under strain. So there is certainly something about making sure everyone recalibrates and is pointing in the right direction. Having said all of that, the final thing I would say is what we will always do to make sure that the outcome that we choose is one that's in the best interest of the victim. Because that's always got to come first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Do you want me to continue in terms, you asked supplementary around the offender diversion team, I think.
Yes, I did, if you would. Thank you.
Well, to build on what I was saying, to ensure we're consistent throughout, because clearly when we're discharging or applying a community resolution, we need to ensure that there's consistency across the county. And part of that is done through the offender diversion team. There was a pilot that we set up to ensure that we've got standards that we can audit so that we weren't ending up with something quite partial on the one hand, something quite severe on the other. So the team itself standardised the condition set for conditional cautions and ensures the progress of community resolutions is managed throughout. So that if somebody agrees to do something, we are tracking that the individual is doing the thing that we've agreed as part of the closure of the crime, and ensure that the victim throughout always and understands where we're going is appropriately heard and also. So the team, and again, it comes back to I think the point the chief was making earlier. It's quite right that we ensure that we've got consistency, ensure that we've got grip, and ensure that we are delivering at the front edge of this two-tier system. But every time you construct such as a team like that, there was a kind of an inbuilt cost. To the early point you were asking or raising around visibility, clearly every time you're not putting somebody over in the visible space, in the public space, you put them here, we're potentially losing a degree of visibility. But our view, my view, is that this ensures that we're consistent across. Each victim gets a commensurate, the offender or suspect gets the commensurate sanction relative to the victim's requirements, needs, and that's just a way of making sure organisation.
Thank you. That's all I've got on that item. Are there any other points from the floor? Move on then to item 10, Pillar 5, supporting victims. Report begins on page 74. And this time I will remember to make the offer of introducing the report if you wish to.
Again, I'm very confident that you'll have read the paper. I mean, I'm at least get my paper. I could, having gone through it, I could highlight a couple of 2 or 3 things that I probably may well just do given the invitation. I think the first point I probably want to make, and I'm not sure on what page it happens to be. Let me just look on mine. It's page 3 of 32, but on here somewhere else, won't you? Just get
Page 76.
Page 76, thank you. Page 76 towards the bottom. I just want, when it talks about delivering high quality investigations to support the right outcomes, linking a little with the point I've just made. We have what we call an operation converter team, which is now fully established. And as it says in the paper there, that this is about building a team with a particular skill set that approaches those offenders that have already been convicted of particular offences with a view to speaking with them and ensuring that if they want to tell us more about their offending behaviours and why, to ensure that the victims know that actually the perpetrator of the crime committed against them has been identified and is already either locked up or is under some sort of sanction. The team, which we call the Op Converter team, have gone out and spoken with a number of offenders, and as it says in the paper, over 300 positive outcomes have come back, which then have taken into consideration, which effectively gives us the opportunity to go back to near 300 victims of crime to reassure them that we've identified the perpetrator, they're already locked up, already serving some sort of sanction, and that they've admitted their wrongdoing in terms of the crime. Really pleased with that because, again, as I say, we hopefully serving justice in that regard in the way. And that is quite a skilled job for the officers that do that. In fact, I'm happy to see the officers today to commend them for their very good work. And the next point that I probably want to just mention on page 77, I think it's just a reiteration or an underlining. Just fact that we put it on the paper there, that the trials continue to be delayed or rescheduled both at short notice and in the longer term, as we previously described. And we've discussed this before, but I just want to reiterate, it's that continual recirculation of work back into the organisation, back into the constabulary, whereas for witness care, and we talked about the witness care team, I think, at length, but it's just to thank you, and your support through your office in terms of that witness care team and this position. But it's hard work when you've got people that are looking for swift justice, and we have to keep re-engaging with people, get themselves to a particular point, readying themselves for court, and then being told that it's not that they're not necessarily going to be called to give evidence. But as the paper quite properly says, this isn't a Norfolk issue. I want to kind of reiterate that this isn't Norfolk. This is not Norfolk Constabulary or CPS or the Court Services in Norfolk. It's a national issue. There's 2 points that I think I wish to raise to you at this point, Commissioner. But I will pause and allow questions.
I'm just going to pick up supplementary on your last point. Hopefully, morale in the witness care team is holding up. They understand they're running a marathon, not a 100-metre sprint. And with the current state of the CGS, this is going to be an ongoing thing.
They do. They know where they know that we value what they bring. They also know that actually, not least because of the work that they do, the engagement with victims and witnesses, you get, do it well and you do it right. You get positive. You get the immediate positive feedback from people who are very grateful that we, the police, are still engaging with them and helping them through this criminal justice, elongated criminal justice journey.
Because there is nobody else who will be doing this. I have explored with HMCTS whether they would support the funding of it. I'm afraid the response was predictable.
Yes,
they've got their own pressures to deal with. But yes, I'm very mindful that this is a very important part of the business. It goes to, I think we were saying a short while ago about the detection prosecution rates.
Absolutely.
So really important stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The particular question I've got relates to the Victims Code of Practice dashboard and the impacts that this has had.
Yes, well, again, so it's a key metric at Force Performance Board, actually. As part of that core mission, that core delivery, are we updating our victims, particularly, and the way we can, part of that is Victims Code of Practice. One of the measures is around updating victims, but more broadly making sure that the suite of offerings is offered appropriately, special measures or different means that people have. The victim code, I think it's 12 different things that rights. So we previously had some of this is reporting. So pre the full dashboard, it's quite hard because of the way that some of our systems work to identify which part of the code and whether the code has been adhered to by the officer attending. What this new dashboard allows me to do, and then cascade through the whole of the organisation, is to ensure that the codes are being adhered to, the officers doing the right thing relative to the victim, and that we can measure what's going on to the victim and their rights in regard. Okay, so it's, as I say, used at the National Performance Board, it's used at district level, it's used by inspectors and chief inspectors to ensure that their officers and staff comply appropriately throughout. And it's just given us, given me and then the wider organisation the confidence that we've seen really large positive compliance increases across the kind of absolute key priority areas or key rights. So we've seen it right through with the information going out, so our victim information letters gone up, and one of the key issues that I know nationally that both government and that offer the victim's personal statement, right 7, seeing a dramatic increase in the offer being made. Not everyone takes that up, but you'll have heard certainly in significant court cases, of which we had one recently in the Crown Court following a murder, the impact that has on post the finding of sentencing, and also allowing the judge in that particular case to understand the impact it had on the family. It's a way of allowing family people in that case to express their feelings. But that's gone up again significantly. So I'm confident that we're heading very much in the
Thank you. Anything else on pillar 6 anyone wants to raise? Quickly on then. Sorry, it was pillar 5. Pillar 6, item 11. Pillar 6 we're coming on to. Report begins on page 85. Stronger state of communities. Do you want to introduce the?
Well, I'm going to have Ralph too, actually. That's okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. So again, I'll just cover a few highlights, particularly around road safety, because we know that's of significant interest. So there has, in this reporting period, been a slight decrease in the killed or seriously injured collisions when compared to the previous 12 months. There were 7 fatal collisions with 7 fatalities across Norfolk. Last reporting period, which was January to March, it was 13 fatal collisions with 15 fatalities. Equally, just highlighting the Safety Council Partnership has funded a commercial vehicle unit. Sounds sizable. I think it's actually only 2 officers, but there's a table at the bottom of page 86, which shows the 329 vehicles that have already stopped and the 333 offences detected. So a very productive start using their specialist knowledge. Equally, there's been Operation Tramline in this reporting period, which is around heavy goods vehicles, and in the 1 week that ran, 112 vehicles were stopped with 124 offences detected. Also, just to touch on the continued and understandable preventative and educational efforts ongoing around vulnerable road users and particularly the young driver education programme. There's a table on 25 which there's an understandable interest in police activity and has come up earlier in this meeting, but there's an update there on the fatal 4 enforcement. There is, or again, not a huge amount of resource. There is a significant amount of organisational effort around mobiles, seatbelts, drugs and driving, etc. So I just draw your attention to that. From a roads policing perspective, the section 2 of the paper reflects on crime and antisocial behaviour, notable reductions in table 26 for antisocial behaviour across all types, be it nuisance, personal and environment. Burglary from a crime perspective has seen a significant reduction, and so has hate crime, which clearly in the current circumstances is currently being monitored on a daily basis. I think the other element is just around burglaries as well. Not only have we seen a continued decrease in the last 12 months, the solve rate, as again touched on earlier, has continued to increase. So it's 4.1% higher than it was 12 months ago. Around mental health, again, right care, right person has been reflected on earlier in the meeting. So I'll just highlight the section 136 detentions in the past 12 months have seen a significant reduction by nearly a third. And multi-agency work, in addition to the right care, right person work, is underway around improving waiting times for assessments whilst in custody, and where necessary, trying to ensure that beds are identified and people are transferred to those hospitals as quickly as possible. Next part of the paper just touches on crime prevention. OPSEPTA has run in the reporting period, and that's aimed at reducing knife crime. We're working alongside your office, Commissioner, with the planned expansion of the Neighbourhood Watch scheme. And there's been a funding opportunity identified through the Safer Streets there, which we're delighted with. And equally, nighttime economy, again, it's been touched on earlier in the meeting, but there is now a strategic delivery group coordinating that partnership around making the evening and nighttime economy as safe to visit as possible. And the last part is just to thank, as always, volunteers for contributing to our policing efforts. So the 150 specials, the cadets, and indeed the volunteers, again, broadly 100 members there. And there's over 850 community speedwatch members, where I noticed that there's nearly 8,000 warning letters sent out to motorists in the last 6 months. So of course, their work helps us focus where we will target the speeding issues of public concern. But they work across a wide range of efforts, and it's probably a big thank you for that. Those are the key bits I'll highlight.
No, thank you. I'm just going to drill into one bit. I'm going back to table 26. And you noted that antisocial behaviour crime types have reduced over the last 12 months. There is this new revised ASB strategy and action plan, and I wondered if you could comment on implementation and effects.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the first point is just around the sort of the foundations and building blocks that Norfolk Constabulary with its partners has around tackling antisocial behaviour. So it's since probably about 2010, I think, the operational partnership teams formed. That alongside the One County Community Safety Partnership gives us a great sort of governance and operational structure to feed in any changes around antisocial behaviour. I think we are not one of the 10 pilot forces, but the areas that it was focusing on is around hotspots policing, around immediate justice. There's going to be a new sort of interventions available to agencies around that zero tolerance approach, which we will feed in through it already been sort of briefed from the Community Safety Partnership, but there are a neighbourhood improvement board locally within the constabulary, which works with partners in terms of there's a Safer Norwich board and so on and so forth, in terms of being able to roll these interventions out as they arrive. Keep it for us, though, we're already working together on those problem solving areas. We are lucky, I think I might have highlighted in the last meeting, that in purest crime hotspot areas, Norfolk has very few, if any, that would meet that academic profile. So we are working around trying to identify visibility hotspots, safer streets hotspots, and social behaviour hotspots. And our community policing team recently in the summer has done a great piece of work around tackling antisocial behaviour within the city, but exactly that approach of being able to focus with partners and then withdraw, leaving the community able to sustain the improvements that have occurred. So it's kind of all, whilst we're not in the 10 hotspot areas that received that additional funding, we joined you and partners in terms of the bits of Safer Streets funds have been successful. And again, the areas we'll be looking to invest in are exactly around tackling antisocial behaviour, that neighbourhood watch scheme, and we're delighted that that money has been successful.
Thank you. I'm just sort of one supplementary. You referred to the city. I just wondered whether the view is that ASB is an urban issue or whether there's a problem in the rural areas as well.
No, so all 7 local authority areas have an operational partnership team. It was just that the community policing team, which is an additional resource, is kind of a roving team we're able to apply to areas under sort of with the resource issue. So Norwich was the recipient of that community policing team additional support. All 7 areas have an operational partnership team. All 49 neighbourhoods have allocated beat managers who work to identify what the neighbourhood priorities are. And again, if I look at the 49 sort of list of priorities identified, antisocial behaviour will be featuring in those, and there would be local problem solving available to them.
So even service, rural or urban, regardless of where you are. Thank you. That's all I've got on item 11. Unless there are any other points from the floor? Keep looking at the board. There's only Kirsten on the board and he's sat next to me.
Okay.
Let's move on then to item 12, coming into the final straight. Emerging operational risks. Verbal updates, there's no reports in the papers. Chief, is there anything you want to raise that's not been covered elsewhere?
Well, probably appropriate for me just to briefly note that we are keeping a very close eye on the local impact of events in the Middle East. There were pro-Palestinian protests in Norwich city centre last week. We anticipate that further protest is likely. We also anticipate that there'll be significant concern amongst Norfolk's Jewish community. So we are seeking to engage as appropriate with all relevant parties. Clearly a very sensitive and difficult time. So we monitor very closely and we'll be following national guidance that is being set by NPCC as to what our approach should be. We will also be tracking any impact on hate crime, as Ralph alluded to earlier. Certainly in London, we have seen a significant increase in hate crime targeted towards the Jewish community. I think it's too early to say what impact we have had here, but it's something that probably the authority will be very, very robust in our response to it, and certainly wouldn't tolerate such action. Clearly, it's still early days in the conflict, and therefore it's early days in terms of how this might manifest itself from a local policing perspective, but it's something we're tracking closely.
Thank you for that. Just to pick up on one point, you mentioned that we've had pro-Palestine protests, legal under freedom of speech in our free liberal democracy, as opposed to pro-Hamas, which would be illegal.
Absolutely correct.
Because I'm very conscious you tread a fine line of impartial policing. I just wanted to pick up on that.
Yes. No, you're right too. You describe it accurately. The policing of protests is always incredibly difficult. And it's often a fine line that we tread in terms of allowing that fundamental right to protest, whilst also meeting the expectations of the broader community and how they would expect us to respond. But as said, we're monitoring it very closely, and we'll see what the next few days and weeks brings.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Anything else on that item on the floor? Item 13, any other business? Anyone got anything they wish to bring to the table? It's easy. Item 14, last item, dates of future scrutiny meetings. They are as given on the agenda. I've got one observation that came out of the agenda setting meeting when we were looking at this meeting, and that's the subject of the plan next March and whether we should keep it in. I'm mindful that the PCC election happens very shortly afterwards. I'm also mindful that the constabulary will be preparing for the HMICFRS inspection. I'm content to take it out, but I think everyone at the table is content to take it out, but I just felt we ought to minute it formally in this forum if everyone's agreed. Any amber or red cards? All green cards.
Oh, right.
We will pick that one out. Thank you. And I think in conclusion, really grateful to everyone who's contributed, whether it's writing reports or supporting the meeting. Chief, can I thank your team for the work that's gone into all of that, which has been great as ever. And on that happy note, I'll close the meeting.